The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of wood smoke and a fear that clung to the worn stones of Koprivshtitsa like morning mist. Elena, barely 18, moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned early that stillness could be a shield. Her hands, nimble from countless hours at the loom, now worked with a different kind of precision, stitching not patterns but secrets. Each pass of the needle through the coarse fabric of the revolutionary flag was a silent prayer, a defiance whispered into the very fibers. Her home, a modest two-story house with a wooden balcony overlooking the winding cobblestone streets, should have been a sanctuary. Instead, it was a hub, a clandestine nerve center in the simmering rebellion. Tonight, the air was tighter, charged with an unspoken anticipation that frayed at the edges of even her practiced calm. Her father, Dimitar, a man whose gentle eyes belied a will of iron, sat hunched over a flickering oil lamp, his gruff voice a low murmur as he spoke with two other men, their faces grim in the shifting shadows. Maps, crude but meticulously drawn, lay spread before them, marking roads and Ottoman garrisons like veins of oppressive power. Elena moved silently, placing a tin of lukewarm tea beside them. She caught snippets of their hushed conversation. "The time is nearly upon us. Panegyric awaits the signal. Freedom or death," the words, once abstract ideals, now felt sharp, cutting, like the cold mountain air that seeped through the cracks in the walls. Life under the Ottoman yoke had always been a delicate dance between existence and subjugation. Elena remembered stories from her grandmother, tales of a time before, a golden age of Bulgarian kings and proud warriors. Now they were raya, a term spat like an insult, signifying their status as Christian subjects, second-class citizens in their own land. Taxes, arbitrary and crushing, squeezed the lifeblood from their small village. The dreaded jizya, the poll tax levied on non-Muslims, was a constant, gnawing anxiety. Every spring, the collective dread of its collection hung over the village like a shroud. She recalled the shame that had burned through her when, as a child, she'd seen Ottoman soldiers swagger through the market, their eyes lingering too long on the young women, their casual cruelty a stark reminder of who held power. Her father had taught her to keep her eyes down, her voice soft, to blend into the shadows. But inside her, a small, insistent flame of resentment had always flickered, refusing to be extinguished. The April Uprising wasn't merely a political maneuver. It was the culmination of generations of simmering fury, a desperate, guttural cry for dignity. The revival had been slow, painstaking work. Monasteries, hidden deep within the mountains, had become bastions of identity, preserving ancient texts, teaching forbidden histories. Elena herself had learned to read and write in secret, her letters carefully formed, each word a defiance. She knew of Pasii Highlandarski, his Slav-Bulgarian history, a book that had ignited a forgotten pride in the hearts of her ancestors. The establishment of the Bulgarian Exarchate, their own independent church, had felt like a first breath of true freedom, a tangible sign that their identity could not be entirely extinguished. But the breath had been short-lived. The Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe as the foreign papers called it, was ailing, but its sickness was a malevolent one, lashing out at its extremities as it decayed. The year before, drought had scorched the land, leaving crops withered and bellies empty. And then the new taxes. Elena remembered the collective groan that had rippled through the village when the news arrived. It was the final straw, the weight that broke the camel's back. Now, the whispers of rebellion had solidified into a desperate, dangerous plan. The secret committees, the Komati, had been formed swiftly, like mushrooms sprouting after a rain. Men like her father, who had once been content to till their fields and keep their heads down, now met under the cloak of night, their faces hardened by resolve. Elena had seen them, these unlikely revolutionaries, the stoic farmer, his hands gnarled from labor, the quick-witted tailor, his eyes sharp with intelligence, The quiet priest, his prayers now laced with fervent pleas for divine intervention. She knew of the cherry cannons, crude artillery pieces fashioned from hollowed-out tree trunks. A grim smile touched her lips. They were symbols more than weapons, of a desperate, indomitable spirit. They spoke of a people willing to forge their own salvation from whatever meager resources they possessed. One afternoon, a week before the appointed day, a young man from Panegyrisht, breathless and pale, arrived at their door. He was a messenger, his eyes wide with a combination of terror and fierce excitement. He carried news that chilled Elena to the bone and simultaneously set her heart racing. The uprising had begun, prematurely, in Koprivshtitsa itself. Toda Kablshkov, a leader of the local committee, had been surrounded by Ottoman troops. Rather than surrender, he had fired the first shot, painting a letter with the blood of an Ottoman official, the infamous bloody letter, and sending it galloping towards Panegyrisht, a desperate signal to ignite the flame. A tremor ran through Elena. She had known the day would come, but the suddenness of it, the unexpected early spark, had caught them unawares. Her father stood, his chair scraping against the wooden floor, his face etched with a mixture of apprehension and grim resolve. "It begins," he said, his voice a low rumble. The next few hours were a blur of frenetic activity. The church bells, usually ringing for prayer, now tolled a frantic, urgent peal, a call to arms echoing through the mountain air. Men, young and old, streamed into the village square, armed with whatever they could find, rusty axes, ancient scythes, even farming implements sharpened into makeshift spears. A few had precious hunting rifles, passed down through generations. Elena watched, her heart hammering against her ribs as the green, white and red flag, emblazoned with the golden lion, was hoisted above the square, flapping defiantly in the spring breeze. It was imperfect, handmade, but in that moment it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She saw her father among them, his head held high, a rifle clutched in his hand. He caught her eye and gave a quick, reassuring nod. Elena knew then what she had to do. She couldn't fight with a weapon, but she could help. She joined the women who were preparing food, bandaging wounds, and encouraging the men. Her hands, once tasked with stitching flags, now tore strips of linen for bandages, her mind racing with the frantic energy of the moment. The air crackled with a dizzying mix of elation and profound trepidation. They had taken their town, declared their freedom, however fragile. But the chilling knowledge that this nascent liberty might be terrifyingly short-lived hung heavy in the air, a sword of Damocles dangling by a thread. The initial days were a heady rush of improbable triumph. News carried by breathless runners spoke of other towns joining the revolt, Panegyrisht, Batuk, Koprivshtitsa. Hope, fierce and fragile, bloomed in Elena's chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could truly throw off the centuries of oppression. But then the whispers began to change. They grew darker, more ominous. Rumors of Ottoman reinforcements, of irregulars, the dreaded bashi-bazouks, descending upon the rebellious villages. These were not disciplined soldiers, but savage mercenaries, driven by a thirst for plunder and blood, uncontrolled by any central authority. Their tactics were designed to inflict maximum terror, to extinguish any flicker of defiance. The first true tremor of fear struck Elena when a group of refugees, hollow-eyed and dust-stained, stumbled into Koprivshtitsa. Their stories were fragments of horror: burning villages, indiscriminate killings, men butchered, women violated. A cold dread seeped into Elena's bones. Batuk, a name that would forever be seared into the collective memory of her people, had become a graveyard. A panic swelled. Koprivshtitsa, initially spared due to its strategic importance and early revolt, now braced for the inevitable. Her father gathered the family, his face a mask of grim determination. "We must go to the mountains," he ordered, his voice raw. It's our only chance. Elena clutched her younger sister's hand, the child's eyes wide with uncomprehending fear. The journey was a nightmare. They joined a desperate, silent throng, a river of humanity flowing towards the treacherous, rocky slopes. They moved under the cloak of night, their feet stumbling over uneven terrain, the screams and distant crackle of fire a constant torment in the background. The acrid smell of burning timber and flesh hung in the air, tenacious and sickening. Elena saw the faces of her neighbours, etched with terror and despair, their few possessions clutched tightly in their hands. Children cried, their wails quickly stifled by desperate parents. Every rustle of leaves, every snapped twig, sent shivers of fear down her spine. The constant, pervasive threat of discovery, the cold knot of anxiety in her stomach, were almost unbearable. They huddled in caves, their bodies aching from exhaustion, their spirits bruised by loss. Elena tried to keep her sister's spirits up, telling her stories, humming old folk songs. But the vibrant melodies felt hollow, swallowed by the immense silence of their despair. She saw families torn apart, brave men going back to fight a hopeless battle, their wives and children weeping silently as they disappeared into the darkness. She witnessed acts of incredible cruelty and flashes of profound human kindness, strangers sharing meagre rations, a guiding hand offered on a treacherous path. When they finally dared to venture back, Koprivshtitsa was a ghost town. Homes were charred shells, their insides gaping wounds to the sky. The familiar cobblestones were littered with debris, stained with blood. The silence was deafening, broken only by the mournful cries of scavenging crows. Elena walked through her own village, her heart an aching void, the trauma of what she had witnessed leaving an indelible, festering scar on her soul. This was the price of freedom, exacted in blood and tears, in the systematic destruction of their communities and the shattering of dreams. Yet even in the crushing depths of despair, a flicker of defiance remained. It was a stubborn, persistent flame, nurtured by the shared grief and the unwavering spirit of Bulgarian identity. Weeks later, as they slowly began to rebuild, word began to trickle down from the major cities, whispers of something distant yet powerful. The foreign press. Elena heard the name Mac Gahan, an American journalist for the London Daily News, and Schuyler, an American diplomat. These men, they said, had travelled through the ravaged lands, fearlessly seeking the truth. They had seen the horrors of Batuk, walked over the bones of the dead, documented the atrocities with meticulous, heartbreaking detail. Their reports, published under stark, evocative headlines like Bulgarian Horrors, were reaching the ears of Europe. Then came the name Gladstone. They said he was a powerful Englishman, a former Prime Minister, who had seized upon the revelations. He had published a pamphlet, Bulgarian Horrors and the Question of the East, a scathing indictment of Ottoman rule, a passionate appeal to Britain's moral conscience. The unspeakable Turk, he had called them. Elena couldn't read the foreign papers, but the echoes of their words resonated deeply within her. It meant their suffering wasn't in vain. The world, finally, was beginning to listen. The outrage wasn't confined to Britain. Victor Hugo, the celebrated French writer, had declared, "What is happening in Bulgaria? A crime." Even Charles Darwin and Oscar Wilde had added their voices to the chorus of condemnation. This growing international pressure, though slow and seemingly distant, was a crucial turning point. It transformed their localized tragedy into a powerful, global human rights cause. It exposed the moral bankruptcy of supporting a regime capable of such atrocities. The ripple effects were slow but inexorable. The Constantinople Conference, where the great powers tried to broker a peaceful solution, failed because the Ottomans, arrogant in their power, rejected proposals for reform. This gave Russia, long eyeing the Balkans, the pretext they needed. In April 1877, Russia declared war on the Ottoman Empire. This time, unlike previous conflicts, Great Britain, restrained by overwhelming public outrage, stayed neutral. The Ottomans were on their own. Elena watched from afar, clinging to every scrap of news. Russian forces, aided by enthusiastic Bulgarian volunteers, the Opolchensi, began to win victories. The siege of Pleven, a prolonged and bloody struggle, felt agonizingly distant, yet its outcome would determine their future. When news finally reached Koprivshtitsa that Pleven had fallen, a cautious, fragile hope began to bloom in the devastated land. The Treaty of San Stefano, signed in March 1878, largely fulfilled Bulgarian national aspirations, creating a vast, autonomous Bulgarian principality. It was too good to be true, Elena thought, and it was. Other European powers, fearing too much Russian influence, resized their dreams at the Congress of Berlin. Bulgaria was divided, a cruel blow, but even then a recognized Bulgarian state emerged. An autonomous principality, nominally under Ottoman rule but functionally independent. It wasn't the greater Bulgaria they had dreamed of, but it was a beginning. A foothold. A testament to the sacrifices of ordinary people, like her father, like the unnamed rebels in Batuk, like herself. They had risen up against insurmountable odds, and though their immediate revolt was crushed, their cry for freedom had resonated across continents, forcing the world to act. Elena grew older, the lines of hardship etched around her eyes, but also a quiet strength. She saw the new Bulgaria slowly take shape, the scars of the past slowly fading, replaced by the vibrant life of a new nation. She never forgot the acrid smell of burning, the silent march of refugees. But she also remembered the defiant raising of the flag, the shared meals in the mountains, the quiet courage of her neighbors. The April Uprising, despite its immediate military failure and severe repression, was a profound turning point. It irrevocably altered the geopolitical landscape, demonstrating the undeniable viability of Bulgarian national claims and forcing the great powers to finally address the Eastern question with concrete action, rather than mere diplomatic platitudes. Elena's story, like that of countless others, often unnamed, became part of the fabric of Bulgaria. Her life, once defined by quiet obedience and underlying fear, had become a testament to resilience, to the enduring power of an idea: freedom. The individual actions, even seemingly minor roles, the stitching of a flag, the sharing of a bandage, the whispered prayer for defiance, had contributed to a monumental event. The memory of the uprising, a raw wound for a time, slowly transformed into a source of unwavering national pride. It reminded her and all Bulgarians that even in the darkest hours, the sacred flame of liberty could never be truly extinguished. It was a story of human dignity rising against oppression, of a people who, despite unimaginable suffering, would not be silenced. And it stands still as a powerful beacon, illuminating the path for all oppressed people, a profound example of the immense price of freedom and the unyielding human quest for self-determination.